At the beginning of September, when the Indian Space Research Organization is riding high based on the success of the Chandrayaan-3 moon probe and the newly launched Aditya Sun probe, it's worth asking exactly what the difference is between Chandrayaan 2, which ended up in massive failure, and Chandrayaan 3. If you remember, Chandrayaan 2 was 4 years ago, 2019, and after a pretty much picture perfect trajectory, the orbiting spacecraft did reach the appropriate orbit around the moon, and incidentally, it is still there, and it did say hello to Chandrayaan 3's orbiter. They exchanged pleasantries, I believe. And then it launched its lander, and unfortunately, the lander, instead of a soft landing, crashed onto the moon's surface and was lost forever, which of course was a tragic loss. And after years of struggling and planning and engineering that mission, it was a tremendous heartbreak for the ISRO. And I remember vividly the then chairman of ISRO, Dr. Shivan, who came up from very humble beginnings as a farmer's son in Kanyakumari district. I remember him uncontrollably bursting into tears at this loss, and I remember the Prime Minister consoling him. Anyway, what happened then? And what brings this into sharp relief is the almost identical fate of Russia's probe Luna the second, or sorry, Luna-25, which crash landed onto the moon's surface just a few days before the Indian space probe landed successfully. Same story. It reached the appropriate orbit around the moon, but then the lander crashed, and I believe they have found the spot where it crashed. There is a new crater there. But the question here is the Russians, or at least their predecessor, the Soviets, had done a number of lunar probes, and the fact that it's numbered 25 suggests that there were 24 of them before. I don't know how many of them were successful, but they do have the experience and the knowledge and the background, I believe, for doing a perfect landing. So why did it also face the same fate as Chandrayaan 2? Now, when I look around, I have a I have a suspicion that it wasn't entirely because of equipment failure or software failure or something like that. And the reason I suspect that that is true is because of a small snippet I read somewhere that Chandrayaan 2's lander, which was called Vikram, in honor of Vikram Sarabhai, the father of the Indian Space Research Organization's efforts to become a space power. It's called Vikram, and it was autonomous. That's very interesting because in Chandrayaan's case, the lander, also called Vikram, was directed from Mission Control, which I guess is in Hassan, Karnataka. And there is an interesting thing there, which is that the distance to the moon is so much that it takes about 3 seconds for a command to reach the remote spacecraft from mission control on the ground. And that is an eternity because all sorts of things can happen. But even more than that, what it suggests is that those signals could have been intercepted by somebody or jammed by somebody. And I'm not going to speculate as to who it might have been, but let us say a rival power, a space power, with the motive and the means, whatever they are. The means, yes, there are several nations that could do it, intercept or jam. And the motive, well, I leave that to your imagination. They could have stopped that Chandrayaan 2 lander Vikram in its tracks by sending an incorrect signal. Okay, and that is possibly exactly what happened to the Luna 25 probe as well. Now, space is not only exciting and a symbol of national rejuvenation, revival, national prowess, whatever, it's also fairly down to earth in terms of profits. For example, there is essentially a land rush on the moon because everybody wants to establish their space, the place that they land on, although there is a treaty that says nobody can actually own the moon. But of course, if you have set up a space station somewhere on the moon, well, you'll pretty much claim the land around it. And especially as they say, the South Pole is where you might find water in those deep craters and crevasses, and the water could be very useful for further missions on the moon and even to take off from there carrying a load of this frozen water there. So there is a definite commercial intent. But there's also the question of wouldn't you like to kneecap your opponent and prevent them from gaining the glory of being first to do this, first to do that? It's not unknown. Let us remember that a few years ago, quite a few years ago, I think 25 years ago or something, if I'm not mistaken, there was this incident where this senior engineer named Dr. Nambi Narayan from the ISRO's Trivandrum facility, Vikram Sarabhai Space Center, and the Liquid Propulsion Lab, he and another engineer, these two were accused of being spies and being honey trapped by a couple of Maldivian women and sharing India's secrets with various unnamed powers. And it took some 25 years or so for Nambi Narayan to clear his name. And all this is wonderfully depicted in the biopic Rocketry, the Nambi story. And that, I believe, was another attempt by a power to prevent India from becoming a space power. And the reason is India has shown the ability to do these things for a fraction of the cost that an American or a European or maybe even a Chinese launch would cost. And many commentators were amazed by the fact that the Chandrayaan mission cost less than what a Hollywood movie about space would cost. So India could be potentially a major competitor in the space launch business, and therefore its cryogenic engine project, which was what Nambi Narayan was leading, was handicapped, and in fact it ended up being 19 years late. So there is precedent for people interfering in India's space efforts, not to mention the unfortunate fact that quite a few scientists and engineers have been found dead mysteriously. In fact, not a few. Something like 150 to 200 of them have been found dead in their homes, or at least a few of them were found on railway tracks and so on, mysteriously. This is not normal and not natural, partly because the folks who are in the ISRO are highly dedicated. A lot of them come from relatively small schools, not the famed IITs, and they take a lot of pride in their work. And for them to suddenly commit suicide doesn't quite seem right. So I think one could piece together a possible story that suggests that there is sabotage going on. There are malign powers behind this, and the reason why Chandrayaan-3 was able to escape the fate of Chandrayaan-2's lander was because it was autonomous, and that was the hack or the fix that helped make this whole thing come together.